Hey everybody, welcome. If you're coming in, go ahead and find a seat. Looks like we got a nearly full house, which is really exciting for 8 a.m. on the first day of the show. So everybody welcome and thanks a lot for coming out. I'm Steve Wilson. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Contrast Security. If you read the synopsis for the session, you might have seen Tom Kellerman's name from Contrast Security on that. Tom's unfortunately under the weather, so I'm going to sub in for him. But Contrast Security is an application security company. I'm the Chief Product Officer. Previously been with companies like Citrix, Oracle, and Sun Microsystems. I have two distinguished panelists with me today doing important jobs in the cybersecurity industry, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So take it away, guys.
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Matt O'Neill. I am the Deputy Special Agent in charge for cyber in our Criminal Investigation Division in Washington, D.C. for the U.S. Secret Service. Been with the Secret Service for nearly 25 years, spending most of that time as a case agent investigating cyber criminals around the world. So as a little bit of background as far as the Secret Service goes, the service was founded in April 1865 as part of the Department of the Treasury to combat counterfeiting at the end of the Civil War. We stayed in the Department of the Treasury all the way up until 2003 with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. But we've always had our roots and ties and sort of mission led to going after financial crimes. And it wasn't until the murder of 3 presidents in 1901 that we picked up sort of our concurrent authorities to protect the president, and then it increased the vice president and world leaders, former presidents, that sort of thing. And so because we've had our foot firmly in sort of our mission of protecting the financial infrastructure of the country, we've sort of evolved as crime has evolved, and now we focused almost exclusively on transnational organized criminal groups that are financially motivated. So sort of one of the big distinctions that I always try to make for law enforcement as opposed to a lot of you guys is most of you guys are in cybersecurity. We investigate cybercrime. And so there is a distinction in the sense of the Venn diagram where we meet kind of in the middle, but our sort of goals and objectives are a little different than somebody who's trying to protect an infrastructure. And so just very briefly, too, just to kind of give you an organizational layout of our agency that might help you guys downstream when you want to interface with us, and I hope that you do. So we have, in DC, we have our Global Investigative Operations Center, which has been around since 2017, that provides investigative, analytical, and logistical support to our field offices. We have 100 and some field offices and smaller offices around the world, and we serve as a centralized fusion center to help enhance our investigations. So the reason why that is largely is because, for example, when I was up in Manchester, New Hampshire, working cases, I didn't know what the New York field office was doing. We weren't set up in a manner that the sharing internally was sufficient to help build out cases. When I started on the job in the late 90s, all of my targets I started in our New Haven office. Best pizza in the world, if anybody from New Haven. So all of our cases were localized in the same zip code, our targets, our victims, and it was easy. We didn't need a lot of analytical support, but we do now. And so we're evolving towards using tools and technology, people process tools to help us get much more forward-leaning to combat criminal investigations. We have a cyber intelligence section that's been around for approximately 20 years, which is sort of our tip of the spear that fights the most sophisticated cyber actors out there. And then 2 other things I want to mention real quick is we have our National Computer Forensic Institute in Hoover, Alabama, where we train 5,000 to 6,000 state and local law enforcement officers a year. We provide them with the training and the tools, the equipment, so they go back to their offices, their police departments, and help support sort of the mission to combat cybercrime. Recognizing we can't do it alone. Our partner agencies, FBI, HSI, they can't do it alone. So we have to get to the point where the first responder police officers have the tools they need in order to help combat cybercrime. And then the last thing for us before I turn it over to Ron, is the most important takeaway that I have for you guys, hopefully, is we have 43 cyber fraud task forces around the world. I highly encourage you to sign up and join one of them. And they're federal, state, local, academia, private industry partnerships to help with information sharing.
I'm Ron Green. I'm the Chief Security Officer for MasterCard. I've been so for almost 10 years. Some of you might ask, well, why does MasterCard care so much about cybersecurity beyond itself? So we do a lot to protect ourselves, but we are very interested in making sure that the whole ecosystem is secure, because if people can't trust making a payment, that's going to affect us. So we do a lot and we engage a lot of public and private sector partnerships, and we do a lot to try and help the small and medium businesses to thrive, even in the face of all of these attacks that kind of take place. In addition to being this Chief Security Officer for MasterCard, I'm also on the U.S. Secret Service's Cyber Investigation Advisory Board. So in my history, once upon a time, I was an Army officer, went to West Point. After the Army, before the Army, I really wanted to be a cop because my dad and all of his uncles were cops, and my dad said, no, you got to go to college, so went to West Point. After the Army, I said, Dad, I still want to be a cop. He said, no, you got to go federal. So joined the Secret Service. And my days in the Secret Service, I was in the 90s too. It was like the beginning of cybercrime. It's like they put together that, hey, we get a bunch of card numbers that we stole from a hotel. We can actually do something with it. At first, it was the extortion thing. You know, hey, if you give me $9,000 in cash, I won't publish the information on the internet for the 400,000 records I stole. And we're like, really? Okay, we'll give you the 9,000. You just got to meet us. And they would. And then they realized instead of meeting us to get arrested, you could just you could just use it. And so we were off to the races. Look, the agency's got a strong history of working on financial crimes. That's its history, as Matt said. And it was the first to really look at cybercrime, or the days of the phone phreakers, and like even in the Matrix, there's a recognition of the Secret Service agent because the agents have the earpieces. So it's a long history in cybercrime, and I'm happy to be here with Matt and Steve talking about the things
Thanks,
that we do.
guys. So I think you can see we have some world-class expertise on the panel here. I will just mention one other thing, which is at the show for the first time. I haven't actually seen it yet, but I have a new book. This is just the galley proofs, but we'll have them at the Contrast Security booth. It's called Cybersecurity and Artificial Intelligence, Threats and Opportunities. So drop by the Contrast Security booth if you want to check that out. So with that, we're going to dive in here. Read this really quickly for a disclaimer. Take a picture if you don't have time to read it. So we're going to talk about cyber attack trends. And I guess, we'll kick this off with phishing and then get into some of the other ones. But I think one of the things that I know I've seen in terms of trends is that the phishing and spear phishing attacks are getting much more sophisticated. From a personal perspective, the best spear phishing attack I've seen, personally was at the onset of the Ukraine war. I had somebody reach out asking for help, saying that they were, with the Ukraine, asking for help with application security, and got pretty deep down into this before we really understood what a well-crafted attack this was. And the other thing I'll say is that on the artificial intelligence side, with things like GTP out there, a lot of the telltale signs of bad phishing attacks are completely disappearing. The idea that you can spot things because they were written by people with poor English skills and things like that, that's all gone. So sophistication's really going up. So you guys want to talk?
So one of the areas of focus for us in the Secret Service is business email compromise. And to Steve's point, what we're finding is that the targeting, because of the high degree of self-disclosure that we all have on social media, like places like LinkedIn. These bad actors are able to really identify the weak links in a lot of organizations, especially small to mid-sized businesses, and really target them. We've seen some attacks that to the same sort of degree of been impressed, where they're taking information on a specific target that they published on, say, Instagram or Facebook, and leverage that into an attack, or like an email that also combined with information from LinkedIn. And so they're creating sort of these sort of dossiers on the individual and target, as opposed to just kind of sending out these, these sort of idea of just going to send in mass and hope that my percentage is 10% or 5% or whatever. They're much more well crafted than we've seen in years past.
I think that's only going to get worse, right? First, like, they can leverage all of your social information that you have out there in order to conduct a phishing attack. But then they also have troves of information that they've stolen from other places that they've broken into. And then you combine that with, as defenders, we'll use AI to help us protect. But you should also see AI as an opportunity for them to put together that trove of information into making something more specific, something more tailored. Then if you add in, look, they copycatted Drake and one other singer, right?
Yeah.
So if they can copy singers, imagine them collecting enough voice samples of you in order to affect a coordinated phishing exercise against like a loved one or something like that. So the problem's only going to continue to get more difficult. They continue to focus on the spear phishing because people generally want to be helpful. You care about other people. You're trying to do the right thing, and so they're looking to attack that. One of the things that as companies we can do is making sure that we're testing our folks. One of the things that we focus on with in our program is not, hey, we're trying to teach you about phishing so you can protect MasterCard. No, we're trying to teach you about phishing because you got to go home at night and you got to go teach your kids. You got to deal with this every day anyway. So if you're better about your phishing hygiene, you're going to be better here at MasterCard. And we also, during our exercises, if Matt and I are in the same team, I get the phishing attack, and I say, hey, Matt, this is the Ron's corporate security phishing attack. That's fine, right? Collaborating, sharing information, helping your network better protect itself, that's all good stuff. We're happy to have you do it. You guys should also share that within your companies. And sometimes, we get a lot back from our folks to say, hey, saw this. One actually helped us protect a customer because it was a BEC from a customer that they were being compromised and being asked to reduce something on our end. So that whole community in responding to this is likely the only way we're going to continue to push through it.
I'll also add one of the things that I always find interesting is a lot of organizations do the trainings for identifying phishing attacks and things like that. But when some of these bad actors are targeting the C-suite level of organizations, when I have conversations with folks at like the CISO, CSO level or below, a lot of times what they'll say is, yeah, they don't really participate in that. And so it kind of, for a variety of sort of organizational, cultural reasons, it's the same thing when it comes to some of the other attacks where they'll have multi-factor authentication by default for the organization, except for a few select individuals that had the power to say, hey, turn that off because it's a pain, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. And so you take an honest look at the organization and say, this has to come. So from the Secret Service, the interesting thing for us is, when we investigate cases and how we do our protective methodology, we use this sort of protective methodology of 360-degree coverage. So, above, below, left, right, forward, back, sort of take a holistic approach to how we do protection. A lot of times what we try to proselytize to organizations is to say, you need to have that same approach. And so if we're on a protection assignment and we leave a side door open for only VIPs, but have it unprotected, bad actors are going to find their way in. And it's much the same when it comes to a lot of these attacks that we're seeing at the senior-most level.
Yeah, I guess the next thing I wanted to touch on is, some of these things like spear phishing and ransomware often come in through these human vectors, but things like attacks on applications are becoming much more prominent. And in the Bank Heist report, which you can go to contrastsecurity.com and download, one of the things identified was that, the senior CISO leaders in the financial industry, 64% of them are seeing upticks in application security attacks. And, this was kind of maybe a dark corner of the cybersecurity world in terms of protecting applications a couple of years ago. I think what we saw in December of 2021 with the exposure of the vulnerabilities in Log4j, which is a popular Java library that was embedded in something like 8 million applications, is that you could find very targeted vulnerabilities that led to massive possible exposure. So we see a definite increase in people focusing on open source. But I think the needle's about to swing back the other way, which is we know that large financial industry players, even ones with sophisticated application security programs, have hundreds or thousands of known vulnerabilities in their applications that they're getting away with because of basically security by obscurity. And with all the automation that's coming into the hands of the hackers with things like ChatGTP and related things, more of those are going to be found. And so deploying measures like runtime application security that can defend from 0 days becomes a lot more important. Anything on this slide you guys want to touch on before we move to the next one?
No, I'll just touch on very quickly at the bottom ransomware to kind of give you an idea as to how the Secret Service fits into the ransomware sort of effort. So primarily, again, our history going back to the Department of Treasury is following the money. And so we take the approach of a lot of times, so we'll coordinate through the NCIJTF, the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force, out in Chantilly, Virginia, with the FBI and other partner agencies on ransomware. But our sort of niche in this space is more following the cryptocurrency as it's moving from the victim to the bad actors, and sort of trying to build out and identify more direct, indirect exposure, with the ultimate goal of making determinations to whether downstream we can seize those assets. And so a lot of times where we focus on is, we like to say that we try to focus on the centers of gravity that enable cybercrime to flourish, and a lot of times that's third-party money launderers, illegal or unregistered money service businesses, those kinds of things. So we try to target those, working with our partners here in the United States, and a lot of times it's long-term processes with partners overseas to take down infrastructure and to seize, whether it's through civil, judicial, criminal, or administrative forfeiture, those assets. And we have a pretty good track record of being able to do that, but that's sort of an idea for you guys, like for largely when it comes to sort of breaking down ransomware variants in the technical side. That's not really what we do. What we do is try to work with, so for example, if one of your organizations get hit with a ransomware attack, if you're part of our cyber fraud task force, or even if you're not, one of the things that you should do, what we always recommend is call someone. We don't care if you call the FBI, we don't care if you call the Secret Service. It's our job in federal law enforcement to do that sort of deconfliction support. There's a lot of, you'll find, if you don't know already, a lot of concurrent jurisdiction across the federal law enforcement space. That's not your problem. That's sort of our job to try to help deconflict wherever we possibly can. And so where we will be able to help is if, say, for example, you were hit with an attack and you're trying to make a determination as to whether or not the decryption keys are available. Reach out to us, reach out to the FBI. If you're trying to make a determination as to whether or not you're making a payment to what could be a sanctioned wallet address, reach out to us. We want to help. We want to. The key, though, with this and with almost everything that we're going to talk about is not waiting until the problem happens to build those relationships. These are the relationships that you need to have if you don't have already. You need to start like right now. Identify an agent in your office, in your area, whether it's Secret Service, FBI, and not just, hey, this is the general number. You need to know the person. You need to go out and you need to like have coffee with them, have dinner with them. if at all possible, even get their personal, because these things happen at 11 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning. You don't have time when it comes to whether it's BECs, ransomware, you don't have time to wait until Monday. And the other thing that we'll also find is work us into your tabletop exercises as to what to do. Hey, again, we investigate cybercrime, we don't do cybersecurity. So, obviously, you have the good cyber hygiene and the offline backups and all that other stuff. You guys know all those things. But what you might not know is when this happens, what will we tell you to do next? A lot of times people have a fear of reaching out to law enforcement until they figure out who internally was responsible for the problem. We always say that's the sort of Super Bowl of finger pointing that happens. But the problem is that if you wait until after you've made the determination as to who is responsible, a lot of times the money is long gone. And when we get into business email compromises, I'll sort of give you some really stark statistics as to how important it is to have that communication with us really at the moment you find out something happened. We're not interested in double victimizing the victim and charging the victim because, we're not regulators. We're not going to come in and say, well, you weren't PCI compliant, you weren't this. Our job is to help you. We want to arrest people and we want to take their ill-gotten gains.
Hey, well, I think that's a perfect transition point to the next section. And a lot of what we talked about on the first slide, those are concerns for any industry that you're in. But when we really focus in on financial services, I think there are a lot of more particular concerns. And so maybe you guys can tee up a little bit of some of these topics, wire transfer fraud, things like that, or virtual currency that are more topical to the financial services industry.
So I'll start, and just I'm going to connect back to Matt was saying about building a relationship with the Secret Service long before you have an incident. One, you build that trust, and you know who to go to in case you have a problem, but you also get a contact. As they see things, they'll reach out to you. And so when it comes to like wire transfer frauds or bank cash out schemes, because of a relationship that we've had with such an agency, they will provide us with the intelligence that they see. They know us, they know what we do, and because we have that running relationship, they'll impart to us information or intelligence that we can be proactive and prevent crimes from happening. And just in one case with a cash out scheme, actually in a couple, and it's been a couple cases, and we actually saw the actors try to attack us in scale. So let me kind of share it this way. The service, they're very active in criminal undergrounds trying to get information on the latest thing that's about to happen. And in one of these instances, they caught wind of a funds transfer attack that, as MasterCard, we actually have an ability to limit the exposure to a victim company. The way that the attack works, they get into a financial service company and they remove the limits and take away the controls to protect money being transferred out of a particular account. And you've seen these where, like over the course of a weekend, 4 million stole over a weekend. So we put in controls that can prevent them. Now, because the agency was working on the investigation, rather than wait for get all the pictures of the money being taken out of the ATMs and the bad guys, they gave us the information to say, hey, can you guys actually stop that? And we can. And it's because we have that relationship, because they shared with us the information. For their investigation, not as much is going to be stolen, but we're going to prevent a company from being really victimized in a really terrible way. So it works both ways. Once you have that relationship, you have a trusted partner that when something bad happens to you, you can go and help them. But there could be something that you can do to help the rest of the community. And this is cyber crimes, cyber warfare, all of that. This is the new civil defense. We all have to work together in order to protect each other.
So to add a little more to what the case Ron's talking about, is a really cool investigation that it's been publicly announced out of many judicial districts. And so the case actually, and to talk about sort of the involvement in nation-state affiliated actors along with traditional cyber criminals, and how traditional cyber criminals don't really care necessarily sort of what verticals they're in. This case is a really good highlight of that. So back in 2012 or 2013, the Secret Service was investigating an individual named Ghalib Al-Amari, who was a money launderer, again, centers of gravity, right? In order for large-scale money movement to take place, you need people who are skilled and have money mule networks that can move that money and get it back to the bad actors swiftly without a lot of shrinkage, right? Without the other bad guys stealing the amount of money. And so this guy was kind of on our radar for a little while, but he wasn't sort of a top tier target, and it was related to global cash outs. And so back in 2018, we had an office in Savannah, Georgia, that was working business email compromise out of Canada. And they identified Ghalib Al-Amari as one of the targets of that investigation. And it was one of the sort of early wins that we'll say that our JIOC had, was to be able to put together this seemingly disparate case that touched on Florida and Texas with mules going around and making withdrawals and then moving the money back to Canada. So we started looking at this guy, Ghalib Al-Amari, and trying to build up a case against him. Along the same lines, the way, if a lot of you guys don't know how we investigate cases, it's not cool, like in the sense of it's tedious work. So we'll do legal process to a web-based email provider, and we'll get sometimes 500,000 emails back, and we have to go through each and every single one of them to look for clues that will invariably lead to additional legal process, which it will lead to additional 500,000 emails, and the process goes on. And so the goal is to get attribution on who's responsible, because what we try to avoid is what we like to call the SODI defense, some other dude did it. Because in cybercrime, it's a lot of times we've had it where, we had a trial in New Hampshire where the guy's like, you don't know it was me, you weren't in my house behind my keyboard and things like that. So you have to prove how that happens. And a lot of times it's because bad guys do stupid things, aside from their criminal acts, where sometimes they have an email that they link as a recovery email to their actual email. Or they'll use their bad guy throwaway burner email and accidentally book a reservation somewhere. That's happened. Or like ordered and you're like, oh, wow, okay, so now we know this guy. So in this investigation that Ron was talking about, Al-Amari was doing BECs, but we were also finding that he had mule networks that were taking part in these global cash outs. And so the thing about global cash outs are when you take over the payment switch application server of a financial institution, and you need to have people all around the world, all at the same time, all have their cards encoded, which is, you can use your hotel key. All they need is the mag stripe, right? And so they have to have that, and they have to have it coordinated, and they have to have everyone ready to go. Well, that creates noise in the network. And so when we have sources that are able to tell us the bank identification numbers, that's the information where we're like, we cannot just hope that we arrest these guys downstream. They're too good, they're too fast. So we leverage our partnerships with the payment industry, whoever we could possibly, this investigation was really cool because it involved not only us, but the FBI office in Los Angeles and the FBI office in Atlanta and several of our offices, domestic and overseas. And what it ultimately led to was the shutdown of 8 or 9 large-scale cash outs taking place overseas, and it really frustrated the bad guys, which we really enjoyed seeing all the traffic. They were trying to find out who the mole was and all this other kind of stuff. And so, again, get attribution, identify who the bad guys are, and arrest them. In this case, the challenge is Al-Amari was in a place that we couldn't necessarily just arrest him. So we have really good analysts, and they identified where Al-Amari, he went to one place every single year, around the same time, and that was Atlantis in the Bahamas. So as a good supervisor, what did I do? I went down to Atlantis in the Bahamas. So I'm like, I got to find out exactly what, because he would post pictures on Instagram, and we're like, we got to get into his life. We got to see what he does. Mm-hmm. We have to try to, because basically our options are extradition or lures. That's pretty much it, right? And so the problem with extradition is it takes a while. So Al-Amari lived in Canada. And we have good relationships with the RCMP, but they struggle to, legally, they can't work sources the way we can work sources. And a lot of times what you'll find out is the successes that we have in criminal investigations don't come out until years later, because the goal and objective is arrest them and then use them as sources immediately, right? I mean, it's obvious, right? And so you don't want to take the guy away from his keyboard for a long time. So anyway, so what happened was, and again, bad guys don't travel like us. Like my wife and I have trips planned, all throughout this year, and we book them far enough in advance to get the cheapest rate and all that other stuff. They don't do that. They book it the day before. So we have to remain sort of on target all the time, and so we got him charged up, and he actually flew down to the Bahamas. You can't, extradition from there is difficult too. I mean, although, some guys only did a couple days in waive extradition. The challenge is in other high-profile cases, they could fight it and it could be 10 years. So that's not good either. So what happened was, working with it, we spent a lot of time, again, partnerships with the law enforcement down in the Bahamas, and basically they said, you can't stay here when he arrived. So what did he do? He booked a flight through Atlanta to go home, which we were waiting for him. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so we arrested him. The information he provided led to indictments of some DPRK-affiliated actors out of the FBI office in Los Angeles. There's a really interesting book called The Lazarus Heist by Jeff White that kind of talks about it. Doesn't credit the Secret Service when it should in some instances. I made sure he knew that. But anyway, so it's that's sort of one example of how we work, and and also how bad guys, for example, Alamari was moving $40 to $50 million a month for BEC actors, along with working with DPRK-affiliated actors on this other thing. So that's why we try to target those quote-unquote centers of gravity, is because if you could take him, it makes it more difficult for the bad guys to move their money, and ultimately, financially motivated criminals, they want the money.
Awesome. All right, well, we're going to go on to the next section. We've talked about a lot of bad things that can happen to you and a lot of law enforcement strategies for when something bad has happened to you. But let's talk about what you can do to protect yourself. And I'll kick this off by touching on a couple of different points that are on the slide here. One of the things we see from an application perspective is the proliferation of APIs. You can't call yourself a SaaS company today if you are not providing programming interfaces to your applications. And what that is doing, in effect, is creating a large, new, not well understood attack surface against your infrastructure for a lot of corporations. And so one of the things that is really important to think about is how are you going to invest in the security of your APIs? And I think most of the people in the room here would consider themselves security practitioners, not software developers. And these are some of the places where that boundary really crosses. And so what I'd really suggest is you need to get together with your security teams and your development teams and talk about strategy for protecting your APIs. And this will probably involve multiple different kinds of tools. There's an emerging class of tools that really have come to the forefront only in the last couple of years called API security tools. And these really specialize in interfacing with your API gateways and things like that and starting to provide defense. But this doesn't negate the requirements for your software developers to still be using secure coding practices. And that means you still need a strong application security program. You still need things like runtime application security protection in the code sitting behind those APIs to protect you from classic OWASP-style vulnerabilities. The other one that I'll touch on briefly here is what's termed here cloud security. And again, just calling attention to another one of the places where development teams and security teams really need to get together is it's not just about protecting the cloud, and there are more and more cloud posture management security tools out there that security teams should be looking at. But you need to be protecting the applications as well. And one of the things that comes up when you're talking about moving to the cloud is you're probably not just porting the same applications that you had in your data center and moving them to the cloud. Your developers are going to start to use cloud-native services, things like serverless functions like AWS Lambda. If you have application security tools that you've been using for years that you're comfortable with, they probably don't work at all in that environment, and you may be leaving yourself open to new exposures. So you need to think about tools that are dedicated or have been updated to deal with things like cloud-native function as a serverless environments. I'm going to toss it over to the other panelists here, and in particular, given your two expertise, there's an item here about threat intelligence, and what would you suggest to people about what are some good sources of threat intelligence that people should be interfacing with to sort of get in front of what's going on out there in the environment?
I'll start. So the first thing I'll say is there are a lot of opportunities to share information and receive information, but you gotta actually partner with it. So there's public-private partnership organizations for the financial services. You have the Financial Service Information Sharing and Analysis Center. You also have which is the tactical side of the sector. You also have the Financial Service Sector Coordination Councils, which is more the strategic side. There are just a number. You have the Secret Services, cyber fraud, investigation task forces. There are a number of organizations that you can participate in. One of the things that a lot of these groups will ask, like if you're going to participate, for many of them, there's no cost. But what they're looking for is for you to participate, not just sit there like a sponge and absorb everything. They're going to put things out. You should put things into the network. Certainly as good and strong as all of the participants that are in it. If there are people that just suck up all the information and then walk away, kind of like the FBI. They're probably in the room too.
No, you leave that alone.
But we need to do this and work on this together. Having the relationships with the Secret Service or the FBI, having that partnership, that trusted partner who's willing to tell you the things that are going on in their investigation, to give you a heads up and get you information before a problem happens, that's good. Or having that relationships where you can share information with someone where it might not even be an investigation. There are times when we've reached out to the agencies to just provide them, here's some of the things that we're seeing. It's not an investigation. We're just providing them a heads up. And sometimes it is to teach them about new technology that they're going to face. I know when chips started really becoming a thing to encounter, just helping the agencies understand the new technologies that you're bringing, so that when they see it, it won't be hey, what the hell is this thing? They have some idea, and they also understand the resources that you have available to help them counter or understand this new thing that they're facing.
So when it comes to threat intelligence and how we can help, I think a lot of it is understanding what the bad actors are doing and what they're monetizing, and that helps kind of guide probably what you should be on the lookout for. So for example, online, for years the sort of coin of the realm online was payment cards. But with the sort of transition to chip and PIN, chip and signature, that's less valuable, because now it's harder to re-encode a card and use it at a brick and mortar facility. You have to use it basically the bins online, and it kind of makes challenges as far as how to get the product and move it. So then what we find is that sort of the new coin, then it moved to PII. So for many years, and so it's no secret, but it's unfortunate that you can buy anybody's PII online on the clear web for probably less than a penny. So we bought, as an example, one of our investigations, we bought 10 million names, dates of birth, social security numbers, email address, passwords, mother's maiden name, employer, routing number, bank information, bank account number. That's called fulls. 10 million for $3,000. So bad actors use that information in order to then gain access and do account takeovers. They use it to gain access to people's credit reports. They use it for a whole variety of things because of the durability of that information. And so now it's kind of transitioned. Well, that's still there and available now. According not only from what we see, but from like the latest Verizon, was it the Verizon DBIR report, or the recent reports that come out talk about compromised credentials as being the number one thing that bad actors are looking to do. in order, because not only that compromised credentials leads to the network intrusion, but also it leads to the ability to sell that information to others. So the whole cybercrime as a service, where you have somebody that their only job is to gain unauthorized access into an account, they sell it to somebody else who then they decide what they're going to do, whether or not it's to leverage ransomware or whatever they're going to do. So you have sort of that sort of dynamic, and then also sort of to keep in mind as well, of when you're trying to protect networks, to understand, okay, well, what else are the bad guys doing? It's smishing, not smishing, SIM swapping is, smishing is bad, and that's a thing. But also SIM swapping, a lot of folks don't understand how sort of rampant that is in order to defeat the two-factor authentication. So having those ideas, and what we try to do is push out information to our cyber fraud task forces at the lowest possible level, meaning the most widely distributed vector that we possibly can to get it into your hands. So we don't do it. We don't have like a team of analysts that do like assessments where, hey, we're assessing a high probability. What we do is say, hey, bad guys are doing this, and you need to be aware of that. And so therefore, it's sort of written at a more base level. And a lot of times it's because, I'm not that technical, and I wrote the first 100 of them. And so I just wanted to get information out to the hands of. So for example, we did an alert a couple years ago where it was, hey, we have this one group that are targeting Optiva Diebold 750 ATMs to do ATM jackpotting. Here's all of their TTPs, and then within 2 days, we were able to make arrests. If you're part of our cyber fraud task forces, you're going to get that information in your email inboxes, wherever we get it. We don't have like a cadence where we got to push out product, and we don't have a subscription-based model. When we get information, we want to share it, because it does no good for us to hold it back.
All right, guys, so we want to leave a few minutes for questions. We got about 10 minutes left in the session, but I'd like to give each of you about a minute to hit a key point, and if you have a call to action for the audience, please go ahead and share.
So as I said sort of multiple times throughout this presentation, the most important thing that we need to do is work collaboratively together in order to try to disrupt and dismantle these organized criminal groups. And in doing so, that's having those relationships, building with federal law enforcement. Again, we personally don't care, meaning the Secret Service, if it's our Secret Service offices, if it's an FBI office, HSI, whoever, have that contact. Have it ready, talk to them, get them involved in your tabletop exercises. I used to do it a lot where I would have an organization say, hey, tomorrow between 10 and 12, we're going to do a tabletop exercise. And I'd say, okay, don't tell me on what it is, but just call let's actually practice like we play. So just call my cell phone. If you can't reach me, try something like, let's do that, and then I will tell you what I think, and then I'll also even work in our federal prosecutors to provide them access, because a lot of times it's getting to this sort of chief counsel level. So do that. I highly encourage you to take advantage. We can't arrest our way out of this sort of quote-unquote cyber problem. A lot of these actors, almost more than I'd like to admit, are in places that we have a real difficulty arresting. So trying to the next best thing, which is take their stuff and prevent additional attacks. But in order to do that, again, it's as many people say, cyber is the ultimate team sport, and so we're willing participants. Please feel free to reach out to us. If you don't know anybody, reach out to me direct, and I'll link you up with someone.
And while Ron goes, we're going to switch to Q&A. There are mics in the aisles. If you want to queue up to get a question in, you can do that now while Ron wraps up.
Yeah, and my focus will be the same. It's on public and private sector partnerships. It takes a network to defeat a network, and as Matt was saying, they're working in a very collaborative fashion to take advantage of all of us. And it's a shame if some of us have some information that can help us get in front of a bad actor to make their day a bad day versus it being our bad day. And that's just a piece of information that we missed or wasn't shared. That's a bad opportunity or a missed opportunity. So if you're not already engaged, you should. I know there are a lot of groups that we participate in, and a lot of it's the same people offer the same help and assistance. They're there all the time. It'd be good to get more people into the group.
All right, I'll just wrap up my portion and say I do think a really important topic for all the security professionals in the audience is to really work on those relationships between your teams and the development teams. More and more what's going on these days is around APIs, applications, and this is an area that's moving fast, and especially with the rise of additional threats from things like artificial intelligence, this is the time to up your game on that. So this session was originally based around an idea from the bank heist, next generation bank heist report. If you want to get that and read more about this, go ahead to go to the contrastsecurity.com website and you can check that out. So with that, we'll take the first question from over here.
Thank you all for your time today. I was curious, one of the things I see in my job is quite a ramping up of money mule activity, where, as you know, the real person's using all their information and using that to exploit the account and move illicit funds through. So particularly the last 18 months, we've seen that increase quite a bit, and I'm wondering what you all see in your space with that.
So as a choke point in the financial flows, we have seen an increase in so a lot of the sort of ecosystem of money mule networks start as romance scam victims and then transition into witting or unwitting money mules. One of the things that's interesting to us is for the longest time, we were able to sort of disrupt a lot of the financial flows because there were large dollar amounts and they would sort of move one hop overseas to another bank, and then they started. We got better about breaking that down and stopping the transaction. So now they need to break it down into lower dollar amounts in order to then move it overseas to try to defeat some alerting that financial institutions have. The other thing that we've seen that's interesting is the movement of money from traditional commercial banking into virtual asset service providers and then directly overseas. So the one thing that I really think it's important is to know the amount of time that you have if you are the victim of a business email compromise or a wire fraud. The statistics show that we can recover something like 55-60% of the funds if you notify law enforcement within 24 hours. After 72 hours, it's about 1%. And we have a small team in our Global Operations Center that has recovered close to $300 million in BEC funds since 2019 outside of the asset forfeiture process. And in almost every instance, it's because we got alerted within the first 12 to 24 hours. So please call us.
All right, so we've got 3 minutes left, so we got time for one last question.
Yes, hello. I'm Janie Shore. I'm newly laid off from Microsoft, and I'm interested in that SIM swapping issue. It seems like it's an easy problem because you can just verify the person's identity. So I'm wondering, why is that getting so big? If you can explain, that'd be great.
Sure. So for SIM swapping, it's think about how many people have access to the networks of the mobile carriers and who can actually do the SIM swapping. So a lot of it's leveraging collusive employees at the local, you name the place. And then the bad actors don't know, or the victims don't know until their phone stops working. It started with targeting virtual currency exchanges. So guys flaunt how much crypto they have, and then they become targets. And that's kind of where it started. But then there's other sort of things like the Twitter case, where the person hacked into all those accounts and tried to trump up whatever the investment was. That was through SIM swapping, and in many instances, it's through collusive employees at these mobile carriers.
All right, thank you.
All right, I've got about 2 minutes left, so Ron, anything you want to wrap us up on?
Yeah, no, I had a thought, but here's the thought I had on the money mules. Look, knowing how they operate is also an opportunity if you are, say, in a financial service institution or something like that, and you want to research some of what is going on against you. I'm just going to give you an example of something that we did at a financial institution that I was at. They were looking for both collusive and then non-collusive money mules. The non-collusive, they often do a job posting, and so we would volunteer for the job, and we would get the job, and then they would mule the money over to us. Then we can look at the other accounts and see which ones they had, what IP addresses they were coming from, and then we could go and see what other accounts those IP addresses access. So it's this whole spider web thing. And when they would look for us to send, like the $50,000 to them, we would send them $1. Like we would go to Western Union and send them $1, and we would get into this fight with the Western Union people. Or, do you realize it takes $20 to send $1? Like, yes, we know. But we would send $1 just to make them irate. And from that, you get intelligence to protect your organization, but you also get information that you can share with others. So there's evil out there, but if you think in a way that's slightly evil, you might be able to help the institution that you're a part of.
Awesome. All right, well, I think we're out of time. I'd like to thank the panelists here for bringing all their amazing expertise. If you can, please go ahead and do fill out the session survey. Send us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And thanks so much, and have a great RSA show. Thank you. Awesome job, guys.